What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another how-to video. I have received a certain topic that has come up a lot, both in the comment section for my videos, as well as in private messages on Instagram and on Facebook about how to pack items for grading. While it sounds fairly intuitive at first, the more I thought about it, the more I thought that this video might be helpful for those of you who have either loose graded items or mint on cards, and how to pack them so they safely arrive at the grading companies. There are some issues and concerns that people have about sending certain items. So I've got two examples here. One of them is just kind of a pretend mint on card. This is not worth anything. I'm sure I'm going to do a video on it at some point, but and I'm not going to grade it, but I thought I'd use this for my mint on cards section to the video. And then, of course, I just showed you guys this fairly recently, my first shot prototype Weequay Power the Force 2 unpainted figure. It's actually a fairly expensive prototype that I will be getting graded at some point. So I've divided this video into sections. The first section will cover mint on card figures and how I like to pack them. There's no specific right or wrong way, but I'm going to give you a few different options depending on what you have available for packing. And you can take it or leave it. And it's just my personal opinion on how I transport items to the grading companies so they get there safely. And there are some suggested tips that I'll go through. And then I'll do a second section on loose figures. And then I will finish it up with some other general tips and recommendations for how to pack and ship your items to the grading companies so they arrive safe and sound for grading. For mint on card submissions, here is how I recommend sending your mint on card figures. I use star cases, as you would expect. You see them a lot in my videos, and they do a great job of protecting the figure. There's a little bit of space between the blister and the the actual case itself. And the reason that I use star cases is basically because if for some reason Mr. Mailman decides to play soccer with your package, there's give in here, as you can see. So it protects the figure and prevents any kind of damage to it in the event that there's some concaving or crushing during the transit process, and it just gives you a little added protection. So that's step one. One point to note is if you are not using brand new star cases, if you're reusing them from old submissions, or if you have just old star cases, these star cases do expand and contract over time, just with the plastic itself kind of spreading out and wearing out. And what happens is the actual backing can come off very, very easily, like on this one. So if you've got an old star case and you notice that the backer it comes off really easily, make sure that you tape all of the edges so it stays nice and secure. What you don't want to happen is send this in a star case and then during shipping, it all of a sudden rattles out, and then all of a sudden your card back gets damaged. So it's really important that if you're using an older star case that does not fit snugly, that that you use tape to kind of keep it in place. For the exact opposite of that other problem that I just showed you, sometimes the star cases contract, the actual case part itself. And what happens is the backer no longer fits properly inside the tighter star case. You do not want to force it. If you try to force this in there, you can damage the card back, the actual cardboard for the figure. You're better off throwing it away and getting a new one, or sending it without a star case and just very well protecting it with bubble wrap instead of trying to force it in there. As you can see, this one has contracted and no longer fits with the backer. It's usually not the backer's fault. It's the actual portion that holds, the front portion that has contracted. And if you try to force it in there and you do it too hard, you're going to damage that cardboard. I think it also goes without saying that you want to make sure you have the correct size for the star case for the card back that you're using. Here are two different examples. This is, a smaller star case for, for G.I. Joe Pursuit of Cobra, or the 5 POA Force Awakens figures, that's what you would use for this. You wouldn't want to put one of those smaller 5 POA figures inside one of these star cases because it wouldn't fit properly. Eventually it would jostle and the edges of the card back would either get creased or start to, have some damage. So make sure that you have the correct size star case for the mint on card that you're using or that you're submitting to the grading companies. And this is my own personal opinion here, so you can take it or leave it. But some sellers, when I've purchased mint on cards, they will stuff this star case full to the gills. This is partially filled right now. But some sellers will stuff this completely full with packing peanuts. And my personal opinion is that's not the right thing to do. Because what happens is when you start pressing down on it, if it gets damaged in shipping, or say the box gets damaged in shipping, the reason for the star case is to give you some give to protect that blister. If it's full of these packing peanuts, those packing peanuts are going to start indenting into the blister or the card back itself and cause damage. So you're better off, in my opinion, unless it's a very, very heavy figure like a tri-logo where there's a lot of give of the figure inside the blister and can bounce around, you're better off having this completely empty, this star case empty, and not including packing peanuts. We'll go through another solution shortly with how to handle blisters that have figures inside the case without this inner tray, and so the figure's bouncing around inside and you're worried about the figure bouncing through the blister. I'm going to show you that in just 1 second. But regarding standard mint on cards, that especially ones that have that tray inside that hold the figure in place anyway, I think it's a mistake personally to stuff it with these packing peanuts. As much as I love acrylic, clearly I have a very large acrylic collection, I do not send items that are ungraded to the graders in one of these sliding cases. These are sliding acrylic cases. And, you can pick these up from GW Acrylic or, a number of different providers. I have nothing against these for display purposes, but I do not use these when I submit to the grading companies. And the reason is that in general, these bottom pieces slide out pretty easily. So unless it's like super well protected, with bubble wrap you wrapped around the acrylic, these things can come loose, allowing the figure to kind of slide out. But more importantly, this does the exact opposite of what a star case does. As I mentioned, a star case has give. So if your package is, receives some pretty major damage during shipping, and this acrylic case shatters, whatever is in here is going to be destroyed. Now, let's say you don't have any star cases. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. There have been cases, believe it or not, where Action Figure Grader has run out of star cases, and I don't have any. So what I do is that I would wrap this in bubble wrap, but a couple of points. I always use very, very easy to see tape. That way, when the graders receive this and start taking it off, they're not guessing as to where the tape is. I use a bright color like painter's tape. And also make sure that you very loosely wrap it. You don't want to wrap this too tight, because if you wrap it too tight, the corners are going to start to bend in. So that way, this is very easy to see how to take apart, how to take the bubble tape off, or the bubble wrap off, because the tape is very well labeled. And then what I do is I submit this inside a cardboard box, wrap this what you see here, in more bubble tape, untaped, along with packing peanuts. That box is then put into a second box, and we'll go over that in a little while. But if you don't have a star case, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure you use very easy to see tape, so the grading companies are not playing a guessing game as to where the tape is as they're taking it off and taking this bubble wrap off of your mint on card. Now, this is a really crude example. You'd obviously want to take a little more care with how you do it if you're really going to use this method. But I have seen some people, when they've shipped me items, to build a sort of a bubble wrap wall around the blister. And I think that you could do this if you wanted to, but I've got a couple of opinions on this. I personally have never done this. Okay. Now, if I had, let's say I had a tri-logo figure with a very large bubble with a very heavy figure inside, such as an Anakin Skywalker on a Tri-Logo Palatoy card back. That is a figure that can bounce around really heavily inside, and eventually, if the box is dropped or shifted around during shipping, that figure can launch like a torpedo and go right through the blister. Chris W., who you know very well through my live streams, that actually happened to him. He had a Anakin Skywalker Tri-Logo, and the figure head busted right through the blister. So that can happen with those types of figures. And I have received figures like this, as I mentioned, where they've wrapped the blister. But just be wary that, usually you do have to use some sort of tape to kind of hold this in place, and make sure that the tape is very well secure, because what you don't want to happen during shipping is for this piece to get jostled around and the tape to come, to become lodged on the actual card back, causing litho damage. Like I said, personally, I've never done this for any figure that I've submitted or shipped, and I've never had anything break, but I suppose it could happen. I've seen examples where, especially with Palatoy Tri-Logos, or like, I don't know, just straight Palatoys with the standard Return of the Jedi cards, where there's a lot of give inside the blister with a figure. I guess in theory, yes, it could burst through that blister. Also, keep in mind that yellowed blisters are more brittle than clear blisters. Yellowed blisters have started to degrade, and they're much more they're much more likely to shatter than a clear blister. So if you've got one that's particularly rare and it's on a yellowed blister, you might want to take extra precautions to prevent that from shattering during shipping. It happened to me one time with a Sakuda Japanese sticker card back of a Bausch that I purchased from Japan. The Japanese seller did not well wrap it, and it arrived shattered. So that does happen. But anyway, this is another option. But again, be careful about stuffing something like this that's, a little bit less crude and more, take a little more time with it. But be careful about stuffing it in a star case after you do this, and make sure there's plenty of room inside the case for the protected blister. So if there is something that causes some damage that causes the star case to indent in, that it doesn't cause extra damage by it. If you want to go Captain Overkill, here's another option. And so I'm going to put down here a little graphic to kind of show you the steps involved. But I do see some collectors do this, especially if it's an extremely rare figure. I have never gone through the effort of doing this until now. This is how much I love you folks. I go to Arts and Crafts Day here on AFG's YouTube channel just to show you an example of another option. If you don't want to use a star case and you don't want to just kind of wrap it in a bubble wrap, this is something else you can do. And so what I did was I measured the opening for the blister, and then I cut it out. Ideally, you would cut it out with an X-Acto blade, so it's much cleaner edges than what I have here. I just use scissors because I do not have an X-Acto blade handy. But you'd want to use like a little X-Acto knife and very carefully cut out once you measure for the size of the blister. And then what I do is I also cut out some cardboard and measure for, I'd add an extra inch or so on each side, just so you have some give or some room versus the actual size of the card back. And then wrap the whole thing, each piece, in this bubble protection. Make sure that the tape is nowhere close to the actual item that you're sending in to be graded. This is, again, a really rough example that just gives you the idea. And then I do the same thing with the backer card. The backer card is about an inch, wider than the actual card back. And that whole thing is wrapped, at least the portion that's going to be touching the actual mint on card figure. That is all wrapped in bubble wrap. Then you can put the mint on card and then put this very carefully around the blister and send it like this. You can even tape here and here, or some other form of tightening up so it doesn't move around in shipping. But keep in mind that you don't want that tape. If this item is a little bit too loose, the edge of the card back could touch that tape. So you just want to make sure you wrap it up carefully. But this is another option that I have seen. Again, you still have this blister that you could either wrap in foam or some kind of styrofoam protection, things like that. But this gives you the general working idea of what you can do if you don't have a star case and you don't want to just send it regular. Let's say it's some extremely rare and expensive card back. you got some options there. But this gives you a general idea of another route to take, but I will fully disclose I have never gone to these kind of depths, only because, to be honest with you, I don't have anything that expensive in my collection that would warrant this kind of operation. For loose graded figures that you are submitting to one of the grading companies, you got a number of different options. The first option is the clamshells that you see here. They make a number of different sizes depending on what figure you have available. Here are some examples that I've just gathered over the years through different purchases where the sellers have sent them to me. This is a larger size case that would fit like a Gamorrean guard or something like that. They make taller ones for like a Monoman or figures like that. As you can see, I took the first shot Power of the Force 2 Weequay, and I have them in a simple clamshell. These open up with a hinge on the back of it. I wrap the figure inside a small Ziploc bag, so that way, if it's jostling around in shipping, it won't get scraped on any of the edges that are touching the sides there. So that's one option that you can do. It's not necessary, but it's an easy option that, these are not very expensive. You can probably pick these up for, $5 for $10 type thing on collectorwarehouse.com. You, of course, do not need to use those clamshells if you don't want to. So, for example, I've got this Lily Letty Gamorrean guard that's been sitting in my collection for a while. And all I do is I just use a standard sandwich size Ziploc bag and then wrap it with bubble wrap. Again, just make sure that the accessory is not touching the figure, so if it does get jostled around, that it doesn't scratch it. But I just wrap it, very loosely like that. I don't even bother taping it, and then just put it inside the Ziploc and ship it that way. That way, it all stays together in one bag, and then I label the outside of the bag so they know exactly what's inside. If you have a very small and easy to lose accessory, I always recommend taking one of these small Ziplocs and putting that accessory inside the Ziploc, so that way when the graders start opening your star cases or however you transport those loose figures, that it does not get dropped and lost. So what I usually do is I put the figure inside a clamshell like that, and then I just fold this up and put it inside with it. That way there's less of a chance of that accessory getting lost as they are opening the item. If you are sending a fairly small size submission, you could even take the clamshells or the sandwich bag wrapped figures and put them all inside a standard size star case and send them in that way. I've done that as well, where I've had, let's say 3 or 4 bootlegs, and I've wrapped them individually and then put them in this star case, and you can even, tape the star case before putting it in the box for shipping. The key thing to remember is if you have a very fragile figure, such as a rare Uze, or a prototype, or a pre-production piece, or like say a Hungarian bootleg where the thumbs and arms can break off super easy, I always, no matter how I wrap it and send it to the grading companies, if it's super fragile, make sure to put a label on the outside of the bag or the clamshell saying, very fragile, be careful when opening. That way it just gives one final warning to whoever's opening that box to take care when opening the figure so it is not damaged. I wanted to leave you with a few parting shots before we wrapped up this video. And I've got a few graded examples here in front of you, but I'm going to be interspersing some photos that I took as I wrapped up a few items for grading. First of all, be sure to take photographs of all of your items that you're sending. And also make sure to make a copy of the shipping documents that you're sending to the grading company. You want to have all documentation. You could even take video of you packing the items so you have some documentation in the event something goes wrong. Next, be sure to double box. That's what I do. A lot of people don't do that, but me personally, I believe in double boxing. I take the star-cased mint-on card or the loose graded figures, I put them in a box with lots of bubble wrap. I then wrap that in a small box. Make sure to tape all edges, including the sides. Some of those boxes, if they've been reused, they can be weak. The tape can be weak or very brittle. make sure to reinforce all sides, not only the top, but also the edges. So everything is very well protected. And then the bottom. A lot of people forget to tape the bottom. You know, if the tape looks fine, it may be so, but if it gets jostled around in shipping, that tape could come loose, causing, potentially minor damage. Regarding the paperwork that you are sending along with the figures, I always take the paperwork and I put it directly on top of the box that has all of your items in it. That way, when they open it, it's very evident who sent the item and which order number it is and things like that. I also, if you're shipping items in the star cases, on the first page of the grading paperwork, I always say, please return star cases to customer when the order is complete. That way, those star cases will return to you for future orders. Those star cases, the cost can add up over time, so it's nice to have those back for future orders. And when I get my orders back from Collector Archive or AFA back in the day, it's always nice to see extra star cases get thrown in there, so I know that I have some more ammunition for repacking for the next order. Regarding the labels on the outside of the box, the actual labels saying to and from, I did some funny examples here for you, but I always make sure to add tape, clear tape, over top of those labels. So that way, if for some reason the box during shipping is exposed to the elements and it's heavy raining outside, that ink doesn't bleed. That tape just adds some extra protection in case, let's say, the glue on the back of the label falls off or something like that. Just, I always think worst case scenarios, and 99% of the time you're going to be fine without doing this, but I always just put clear tape over top of both the to and the from labels, so that way it's got some extra protection. I always mark the box on all sides, the top, the bottom, and all four sides, as fragile. Please handle with care. There are some stickers that you can get at like an Office Depot or any kind of office supply store, but that's not necessary. I just have some in the photos here because they're items that have returned in the past to me from grading. But you can just use a marker, like a permanent black magic marker, and just mark fragile on all sides. It may not help. It may not help. Some delivery people could still damage the box, but it just, it's a nice reminder to whoever's handling the package to please handle with care. Finally, who to use for the actual shipping process. That is the conundrum faced by everyone. I'm going to tell you right now that I do not use the U.S. Postal Service for anything that I am submitting to grading. Occasionally, if it's like a subscriber giveaway, or if it's just a very inexpensive item that I'm shipping, or just a gift to somebody, then yes. Or overseas, overseas shipping using FedEx or UPS is extremely expensive. Extremely expensive. And if it's a normal, smaller size box, the cost difference may not be that much to where it makes sense to still use FedEx or UPS. But internationally, I've had pretty good luck with the U.S. Postal Service. But as I've mentioned in past videos, I have submitted items for grading, and they've been delivered to the wrong address using the USPS. So I no longer, anytime I'm submitting something, I don't care what it is, I do not use the USPS. I use FedEx or I use UPS. I always insure for the full value, and a lot of people don't believe in doing that either. But that's something that I've always done. It's not a major cost. It's about $1 per $100 of value. And, some of my shipments, as you see during unboxing videos, some of those shipments can be 10, 20, 30 items. So the cost can add up very quickly in terms of the market value of those items. So for me, if I got, let's call it round numbers here. Let's say I've got $1,000 worth of items that I'm sending to the grading companies. That's an extra $10 in shipping costs, and I'm going to spend that every single time just to give me some protection in the event that something gets lost or badly damaged in shipping. It just gives you some protection that you're going to get some of that money back. And so that's my personal opinion on that. It's always good to have a contact person as well as the phone number for whoever you're sending it to, whether it's a buyer of an item or the grading companies. If you have a contact person and the phone number, so in the event that the delivery person is having trouble finding the location for some silly reason, at least they've got some backup there. I also do require signature confirmation for anything that I ship. It's included with any items or any value over $500, I believe, for any of the delivery people here in the US. But I do it with everything. If it's a $200 item, I still use delivery confirmation just so I know exactly when it was delivered, and I've got proof of that in the event that someone says it got lost. I'm not saying that's ever happened, but it's just nice to have that insurance in place. That's really all I had for this video. If you liked it, be sure to like and subscribe for future content and comment below with any questions. I look forward to being back soon, and thank you again for watching.